Hi, this is Kathleen again, and this is the second video out of a series of 3. This is a much shorter video than the first, and it discusses contemporary social theory, but it limits it to 2 branches. The first social theory that is contemporary, that is considered useful, is post-Marxist. And of the post-Marxists, Pierre Bourdieu and Michel Foucault are the leading thinkers of social theory. Then I will discuss feminist theory, which again, it's a leading and new set of theories. So we'll start again. If you haven't seen these people before, it's me, my cat, my dog. We're at the beach. I want to emphasize that we study social phenomena, not individuals, but how society impacts individuals and how individuals then in turn impact society. And thus society is always changing. Okay, you know the difference between functionalism, which is a very conservative theory and looks at how things work in society, and conflict theory, which looks at who benefits and always strives to examine who has the power in the relationship. The difference between grand theory is that it's large and tries to encompass everything. Middle range theories are much easier to handle. And as I noted before, your choice of theory shapes what you look for. Pierre Bourdieu is one of the first post-Marxists to study post-industrial society. And as a post-Marxist, he still firmly believes in the class system and that capitalism exists. And capitalism has the same flaws that Marx felt. And as you remember, Marx felt that there was a sharp division in ownership and power. And he also argued that capitalism would expand until there was no more earth left. Pierre Bourdieu takes it one step farther, and he's no longer looking at economic capital, but he's looking at social capital and cultural capital. So he's arguing there are 3 types of capital. It's a refined notion of class. Social capital is easy. It's who you know. So you can have economic capital, which is you own something or you have lots of money and sit on boards or have portfolios. And then there's the social capital. Do you know, are you related to somebody who has a very strong position of power? And this is one of the ways elite schools function, is not only do wealthy people go, but wealthy people are able to establish networks. It is no accident that both Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg attended Harvard. Okay, they were able then to meet people who would then fund their burgeoning enterprises. That is social capital. Cultural capital is a little bit harder to grasp, and it is those notions of what is appropriate to do in your social class. For example, people with high cultural class will go to the opera. People with low cultural class will go to rock stadiums. That is kind of the distinction. So this is an article, or not an article, a graph of what it looks like when you take food. And again, this is France. So the highest quadrant is the top right. And what Bourdieu is arguing is not that these are better, but these are different cultural capitals. So the top right, these would be the upper class with business meals and brunch buffets and frappuccino and homemade pickles and stevia. Okay, for the upper middle class, which would be, it's called in here French Laundry Michelin stars, it would have the whole animal, roasted pig, and again this is France, and then you would have the underground supper club and food clubs and the fast food trucks for the right. And again, you're looking at cultural capital plus and minus, and economic capital plus and minus. So this is just an example of how cultural capital actually reinforces and buttresses economic capital. Michel Foucault, and we will really discuss him further in chapter 16 when we talk about the body. He was very instrumental in studying sociology of the body. He also has a different notion of power. From Marx to Bourdieu, the power is top-down. So you have people in power imposing their power on people below them. Michel Foucault argues it's more like a spider web, and that people who are not in power are caught in the spider web, where they have power in different directions bearing down on them. But he also argues that there are nodes of resistance. So there are power webs and resistance within those power webs. And that is a very interesting concept of power, and one I think explains how people can escape from the power of the web. And I don't mean the internet web, I mean the web of power. Michel Foucault thought of institutions as discourse. He argued that knowledge was power, and knowledge was not for knowing, but for cutting, and it becomes embodied in subjects. And then he looked at how social institutions, such as schools, work, prisons, were all set up the same. So you go to school and you sit in rows, and you look at the front and you listen. This is what happens in schools. In prisons, you go to the lunchroom, or you go to your cells and you are alone, and you face out, and you listen. And this is true also in work, where you go to work. If you're in a cubicle, you don't face front, but you face other workers, and you listen to the boss. And Michel Foucault argues that this power in the prison to punish is very similar, or not essentially different, from that of curing or educating. That schools and prisons and work have some remarkable similarities in controlling individuals. It's an interesting concept. It is bleak, except for his concept of nodes of resistance. And the last set of theories is feminist theories. And as you can see, there's much more diversity in feminist theories than there was in classical social theorists. There's African Americans, there's India, there's Southeast Asian, there's Hispanic, and there is American Indian, Alaska Native. So we have much more diversity, although not diversity in gender. There are as many feminist theories as there are feminisms. Feminist has a feminist theory, which is not the same as feminist politics. The theory argues that a feminist theoretical perspective centers around gender, albeit gender that is structured by race and class. And it also argues that feminist research does not subject the respondents to a top-down hierarchy. So liberal feminism is the theory that sources of power are traditional gender roles. Socialist or Marxist feminists argue that the source of power is capitalism. Ecofeminists, along with anarcho-feminists, say the source of power is the relations to hierarchy and technology. And radical or separatist feminists argue that the source of power is women's bodies. so that women who are more frequently raped than men and women who are subject to sexual harassment, that is how power of men over women is exhibited and experienced. Anti-racist feminists, also called womanist, also called multiracial, says that the source of all power is both economic class and male privilege and racial heritage. And finally, post-colonial or postmodern or intersectionality. These are primarily third world feminists who argue that it's not only race and class and male privilege, but it's also position within the world economy. So basically, while all feminist social theory centers gender, the difference in social theory is where the source of power is. Chandra Mohanty argues that sisterhood, in fact feminism, cannot be assumed on the basis of gender. It has to be forged in concrete historical, political practice and analysis. So she argues feminist theory will not advance until feminists work together. They don't have to think the same thing, but they need to work together. And that is your third world feminist theory. And they argue that United States feminists often misunderstand the specific problems within different countries and different cultures. So again, feminist theory centers gender. Different feminist theories locate the source of power differently.